Alrighty, let's take a look at this question. So we're asked to graph by hand this equation, y equals 3 sine theta plus 2 pi over 3 for the domain from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. Okay, so I like to do the vertical stuff first. So we're going to figure out our max y values by taking the formula d plus absolute value of a, and where those letters are coming from, it's on your formula sheet as well, but it's y equals a sine and then b bracket x or theta minus c bracket bracket plus d. So d on your graph is your midline, your horizontal midline, and amplitude then is added to that. That's what the absolute value of a is. So if we take that, our d value actually looks like it's 0 in this case, so it'd be 0 plus our a value is 3, and absolute value of that would just be 3. So our maximum should equal 3. So I usually like to just lightly draw a line on my graph at the max. And then we're going to do that for min in a minute too. Okay, now our min is found by taking our midline, d, minus the amplitude, or absolute value of a. So that would be 0 minus 3, so negative 3. Okay, so we have also the lowest it goes to would be somewhere down here. And then, of course, our midline, as we talked about, was d, so that's going to be somewhere in here on the x-axis. All right, so we've got all our vertical stuff taken care of. Let's do the horizontal. Okay, so next we want to find our period, the length of one cycle. And if we're given the equation, we find our period by going 2 pi if we're in radians. If not, we do 360 degrees, divided by our b value. And our b value is located immediately in front of the theta, but we do not have a number there, so we assume it's 1. That means our period is equal to 2 pi. So the length of one cycle is 2 pi. We'll come back to where we're going to use that in a second. Now, next thing, I like to call this finding our starting point. So we're going to need to know our horizontal phase shift. So our phase shift is our c value in the equation. And that would be positive 2 pi over 3, which means it's actually moved left 2 pi over 3. Now, that is going to help us, as well as we have to look at what type of trig function it is. So with it being a sine graph, we're looking for that midline point as you go up has been moved left 2 pi over 3. If it was cosine, we'd be looking for the peak, how far off the y-axis it is, and that would be our starting point. Okay, so we're looking for that, or we're going to be plotting that midline point. Left 2 pi over 3, so we have to be on the midline, which in this case is the x-axis. We go left 2 pi over 3. Oh, we've got to figure out our scale. So look for pi and then count how many squares. So 1, 2, 3 squares to get to pi, which means each one of them would be pi divided by 3, or 1/3 pi. So our scale is pi over 3, or 1/3 pi. So if we go left 2 pi over 3, that'd be 2 squares, 1, 2, and there's our starting point. And our graph would be going up from that point because it's this midline point here. All right, then use your period, which we know is 2 pi, to get where a full cycle will have finished from that point. So since 2 pi is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares, we're going to count 6 squares away from that starting point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 puts us right here. Now, what we have is that initial point and then the end point of one cycle. Halfway between there is going to be on the midline as well. So half of 6 squares would be 3. 1, 2, 3. We'd have a point there. And that point, the graph is going to be coming down through that point because that's this one. Now, halfway between those first two midline points, it would be up at the top following this pattern here. So halfway would be like 1.5 squares, and then we go right up to our maximum, so up there. And then same thing between this midline point here and the final point. So halfway, 1.5 squares, goes down to the minimum. So we have this point at the bottom. Now that we have basically one cycle drawn with the points anyways, we can now fill in the rest of the points following that pattern. So 1.5 squares to the right, up at the top, we get this point. Now I'm going to go left, 1.5, and I'd have to go down to the midline, or down to the min, I mean. And then 1.5 again would put us back to the midline. All right, and then we can kind of draw our, and try not to make it too V-like. You want to make it more U-ish, I guess. All right, and there we go. That would be our graph. I hope that helped.